Clemson City Police Advisory Board meeting is called to order, and we will start with the roll call. Myself, Lisa Robinson. Eunice Lehmacher. Here. Kevin Bell. Present. Sandy Edge. Here. Riley Wright is excused absence, our Clemson student. Dr. King.
Present.
Elaine Masseri. Winton Hunter. And Ashby Williams, our high school representative. She may be coming a little bit later. Okay, we can move on to the approval of the agenda. If you take a look at the agenda in front of you.
I move to accept the minutes as read, and for the sake of the
And the agenda?
as read, for the sake of the notes, we probably should say who we are when we move. So I'm Eunice, because
Yes.
otherwise Carla won't know.
Oh, right. Yes, thank
Well,
you.
it's video recorded too.
Oh, great. Okay.
Second.
Second on the agenda.
So second by Dr.
All those in favor? Okay. And the approval of the previous minutes, any edits, changes, updates that anyone has seen on those? I think in the second paragraph, the approval of agenda, which is a typo, that should be accept the agenda.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
In the, unless you'd already corrected that, in the second paragraph in the minutes, where it says accent, it's just a typo, it should be accept.
Approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion to accept.
Okay.
Second.
Was that on the approval of the agenda? Okay.
The minutes.
Of the minutes, all those in favor of approval of the minutes? Okay. All right, great. We'll move on to citizen comments. Is there anyone present who is intending to speak in the citizen comment section?
That's my victim advocate.
Yes, I know. Okay. Okay, the next thing up on the agenda is Representative Jerry Carter. We appreciate you being here. Can hear from you now.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here and the invitation. I'm not really sure if there's something specific you wanted to talk about or just a general overview. I can tell you I'm enjoying my days of the legislature not being in session. I enjoy being in Clemson much more than I do in Columbia. And I think as most of you know, when this legislature's in session, it's January through the middle of May, so it takes up a lot of your time. That's not to say that because I'm in Columbia, there's not activities. In this past week, I've had to speak to the Inspector General, Employment Workforce, DMV, and I can't remember who else. So there's constant calls and issues from constituents which we're attempting to deal with. So, but I appreciate that. I look forward to that opportunity. So again, I don't know if you want an overview or if you got specific questions.
Yeah, if you could just give us an overview of maybe the last session or some of the things that we might be interested in that are on the horizon for the next session.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just finished putting something in my
No
mouth.
problem.
I'm trying to chew it. In my opinion, we had a good year the past session. We got some important things done. We got, I think, a really good budget passed, over $13 billion. It allowed us to put some additional money in reserves, over $500 million back in the reserves. We put a significant amount of money back to the Department of Transportation for roadway improvement. Last year they got $1 billion. This year they've got several $100 million. So there's not many places you can go in South Carolina that you're not going to run in some kind of road construction and improvement. But I still hear people complaining about it. But one of the things that they have to recognize is for a number of years, South Carolina touted itself as having the cheapest gas in the United States while not acknowledging we had the worst roads. I mean, so people still tell me, I know when I cross the state line into South Carolina without seeing the sign. So the Department of Transportation, most significant problem right now is finding contractors. I mean, the money's there, so just finding contractors to be able to get the work done. But we'll tell you a couple of significant things that we passed last year. We passed a new law that has to do with DUI. And anyone who's convicted of DUI they're arrested for a second charge, they now have to have an interlock device attached to the car, which basically is a breathalyzer, which the car will not start if there's any measurable amount of alcohol in the breath. So that is now the law, which I'm very, very appreciative we got that through. Most of you will remember last year there was an issue in North Carolina. I think it was Southern Pines, where somebody's shooting at a utility substation and causing a power outage. Well, we have put it on the books that it's anybody who destroys or impacts a utility station, substation, or related equipment, you can be sentenced up to 25 years in prison. So we understand the importance of keeping the grid up and keeping the electricity going. Something's really interesting. We passed created a fund for first responders. That's policemen, EMT, coroner, some other folks that if they die during service, they get $75,000. But if they die performing their job, that is doubled to $150,000. And I will point out to you the young officer over in Easley, who was tragically killed about a month ago, his family is going to receive $150,000 from that fund. So I think he's the first person that's eligible for that. We significantly increased the penalties for fentanyl. Heretofore, felony possession of fentanyl was not listed as a drug unto itself or a penalty. It is now. It's very specific to fentanyl. First offense can result in 5 years in prison or a $5,000 fine, and anything after that just significantly higher. And anybody who's selling fentanyl, if they have a weapon, it's a 20-year sentence. So we're trying to make a point about fentanyl use. Boating safety, we require anybody born after 2007 is to take a class from DNR about driving a boat. Really? Just because of the issues we've run into. And a lot of that has to do with jet skis, just flying up and down. And most of the time, they're not your 25 and 30-year-olds, they're your 14, 15-year-olds driving up and down. Now, last thing I'll tell you is we eliminated the certificate of need, which is for hospitals, for medical facilities. Heretofore, before you could open one, you had to be able to justify that. You had to justify the need from the community, the finances, and everything else. And unfortunately, hospitals and other institutions had a way of stifling that as competition. So we've eliminated that. So it frees up competition and trade. And hopefully, if there's a need, if a company from North Carolina wants to move down and set up an MRI operation somewhere here in South Carolina, they can do it. They can certainly do it. So, those are some of the things that I just jotted down pretty quickly. We had. You can pre-file bills before we actually get into session. So in December, you can pre-file a bill and it'll be ready to go when we get there. Well, this year we had over 1,000 bills pre-filed. So even before we got there, there was 1,000 bills. And then it just continues to build on itself as you get there. So it takes a lot of reading, a lot of time, a lot of interpretation, a lot of faith in some people in terms of just trusting some folks and being able to explain and tell you what the significance of some of these issues are. So I appreciate that. But we'll go back in session in January, and we'll hit it again. We're in the second year of a 2-year session. So any bills that we introduce that were sent to committee are still viable and still alive, and we'll get back to them. There's two big things that I didn't mention, one of which you got to know is the legislature passed an abortion bill. Basically 6-week bill, signed heartbeat, and that was recently upheld as constitutional by the Supreme Court. So that is law, South Carolina law. And the other thing, which I know I had a conversation with the chief, and I think Ms. Lehmacher had to do with constitutional carry. There was a bill, and is a bill that has been approved by the House. And to cut to the chase, it basically eliminates any controls about carrying concealed weapons. You don't have to have training. You don't have to have your license with you to be able to show a police officer you're stopped. It pretty much opens that up. It got passed by the House. There were probably 50 sponsors of that bill, so it was a very popular bill. It got over to the Senate. We were expecting it to come back over, and they just ran out of time. So that's going to come back up, and I expect that's going to become the law of the land. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's unfortunate, but it is the will of the legislature, and that's probably what's going to be coming down the pike sometime January or after January next year. So let me see if you have any questions.
No training at all?
No. Right, and we actually created the law 2 years ago that said you could have carry and conceal as long as you had training. You had some training about demonstration of use of a weapon, which I actually voted for that because I saw where we were going, that we're going to allow carry and conceal. And I know something was going to happen, but at least there was going to be training. So I voted for that bill. But now, no, there's no training required. If you are of a legal age, you can buy a weapon, you can carry it about you. You don't have to have the training, you don't have to have a permit, and you can go just about anywhere you want to, except places that have signs on the front door that says you can't bring it in there.
Oh, is that 18 is the legal age
I think that's right.
for that bill?
I
That's
think that's right.
concerning too.
Yeah. There is specific language about schools and other places, but it actually allows churches. The churches can make the decision as to whether or not they want to allow that. I guess because some churches may hire security or have people there to protect the congregation. I don't know, but there is a specific exception in there for churches, and it seems like something else, but I can't remember what that is.
Does it have pretty good traction? Is it all over the country that way then?
I'm sorry?
Is it working over, like, more, the majority is accepting it that way?
Well, it's moving across the country. I mean, it's one of those things that once it starts, and I'm sure it didn't start here in South Carolina, it started somewhere else, and I say we as a collective
I think
group.
Florida has it.
Yeah, Florida.
They may have
There
it.
are other states that have it. We oftentimes don't we don't engineer anything, we re-engineer it. You know, we see it got passed in another state and it will get brought up and passed, but it's sort of a move, as you can tell just from more incidents of weapons, people having weapons and things happening with weapons. There's more of a sense to open up those laws about where you can carry weapons and under what circumstances. So.
In light of some recent tragedies, is there any chance that the state might revisit the hate crimes law?
I hope so, because I've got a pending bill. I've introduced the bill, and we are only one of two states that does not have a hate crime bill, and the other state is either Wyoming or Arkansas. I can't remember, but we passed it in the House, we got it to the Senate, and the Senate just stonewalled it. I don't know, it became purely political, but it's something that I'll continue to try to push, because it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense for South Carolina to be in such a minority, particularly with what we had happen down in Charleston, years ago. We should be the example leading the way. But one of the things I've learned about being in the legislature is logic doesn't win the day. So it doesn't necessarily have to make sense to get it passed.
And what's the best way for people, if they want to look at some of the pre-filed bills? Is it just to go to the state legislative website, or?
You can't see the pre-filed bills. You can't see them until they're actually filed, because during the pre-filed session, what we can do as legislators is we get to read them, and we can actually sign on as a co-sponsor of the bill, and then it will be published once we get into session, and all the bills will be read across the desk and then assigned to a committee. So you wouldn't be able to see them until we're actually back in the session.
Those things that were stalled in committee last session, those are still available that you could look at?
Yeah, you can see those.
What might be
And,
picked up.
the legislature website is a pretty dynamic. It's a good site. I mean, you can go there. You can do word search if you know the number of
And you can try.
bill number. You can pull it up, but you can do word search. I was doing word search today because I couldn't remember the number of one. But it's also got committee information. It's got everything about all the legislators. So it's a very vibrant site that you can track us pretty well with it. So I would suggest you do that.
Where are the two bills that you were involved with? The one about the responsibility of the animal owner and the one related to the postal worker incident here?
Both of them are in committee. The cruelty to animals was sent to Judiciary Committee, and it hasn't got a rise yet. It's something I've got to get and talk to some people who have greater influence than I. I'm just starting I'm in my second term, and sometimes it just takes, you have to be able to find people with greater influence to try to move something along in committee.
So it's not dead?
No, it's not dead. No, it's
Okay.
not dead. And the same thing is for the Council Reckless bill. I introduced that, but, pardon me, that bill was assigned to Education and Public Works, which is a little strange to me. But I went and talked to the chairman, and actually those are bills, the Public Works side, they actually relate. They have some authority over those bills. I'm still a little concerned about it, but it didn't come up in that committee. And the only reason I was not overly concerned is a very similar bill was introduced by Representative Jay Jordan. He's an attorney. He's been in the House for, I think, 5 terms. Again, he has more influence than I do, and his bill got sent to judiciary. And our bills are very similar, except his would give a greater financial penalty and prison term. It specifically defines careless and reckless, which results in serious bodily injury, which is what we were dealing with here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to change. So I actually liked his language better. I didn't withdraw my bill because it was in the other committee, and I felt that just gave an additional chance for something to happen. And I co-sponsored, I signed on to co-sponsor Jay Jordan's bill. So I'm actually going to be pushing for his bill, but if that doesn't go through, I think mine is a fallback.
That came up in committee already?
Ma'am?
It came up in committee already?
It did not, but I've talked to Representative Jordan, and he's pretty confident his is going to come up in judiciary this year. He's been on judiciary several years. He's actually chair of the House Ethics Committee. Again, I hate to use it, but he's got influence. He's got more standing than I currently have to cause that to happen. So I've talked to him, and I'm keeping up with him and trying to make sure that that moves forward.
What district is he from?
God, I knew you were going to ask that.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can look it up.
Charleston, wasn't it?
No, not Jay.
Or Florence? Florence?
It might be Florence. I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, what I need to do is I am going to bring to the council, city council, we have new directories. Those little books that's got more information than anybody would ever want to know about the legislature, government, state government officials, telephone numbers, addresses. I will give to the chief extra copies so he can distribute them to you. They just were released probably about 2 months ago, and it's a nice document to have.
He's in the 63rd district, and he's from Florence.
Florence,
Yeah.
there you go, yeah.
So I don't know if that is Florence, but it's the 63rd district.
Yeah, I'm in contact with him, and I've talked to him several times about his bill, so he knows that I am supportive, and I would like to see his bill approved. So, as for things coming up, I really don't know.
Before we get off of that, some of the council members have commented and questioned, how do they, as a council, show support for that bill or those bills?
Well, any of those bills, I mean, you don't need to write or try to reach out to me because, I mean, I'm pushing them as hard as I can. But like this one with Representative Jordan, I mean, to send something to Representative Jordan, to send information to other members of the Pickens County delegation. We've got 2 senators, 3 other representatives, just to send them a note, to say this is something that we're really interested in and would like to see you get behind and push.
And the Judiciary Committee too, right?
The Judiciary Committee, obviously, that would be important. That's a large committee. That's probably 15 people. But yeah, anything like that, I mean, they need to hear from you and just know that you're interested and concerned. And we all pay attention to those things. I will tell you, though, if you ever get asked, I didn't realize this, there are listings that you can get on if you're particularly interested in a subject with a association or an organization. They'll ask you if you would, if you were interested in signing documents that go to legislators. We get these things all the time. It's just a blanket email that this organization has created, and this person they'll put their name on it because they've been authorized to, and we'll get it 50 times. I mean, once you get it the second time, you don't pay much attention to it. A lot of times I'll answer the people back and they'll say, I didn't send you anything. I said, well, and they said, so the only reason I say that in terms of being effective, if you get on one of those, when we get so many of them, it's just, we get so many emails, you can't just sit there and pay attention to all of those. So, but direct contact with any of the representatives, legislators, senators, always appreciated, and hearing your input and your suggestions, always appreciated.
Do you think it's more effective to call the office in the district or to call the office in Columbia or to email directly, personally in the district or in Columbia?
I think it's better to email or write a letter. I mean, telephone calls, trying to chase people down. I have a hard time getting in touch with legislators. When I call their Columbia office, as if you call my office, you're going to talk to my administrative assistant. She's going to call me, and then I need to make a decision as to what your issue is and, you know, what I need to do with it. So a lot of times, the most effective and direct method is either through writing a letter or sending an email. That will get passed to them, and then they can handle it in an appropriate time and manner. Yeah.
We had a citizen come here and complain to us, and I understand calls the police chief frequently about the sounds of cars and noise ordinance, and I won't go into all the details, but one of the things he said, which I thought was fairly clever, was the states that have the ordinances where you get your emissions checked and they require emissions, they're quieter cars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which of course, you know, we don't have that in South Carolina. That wasn't something we could tackle. Obviously, we can't have the city of Clemson check emissions, right?
Right.
Is there any chance that the state of South, it would of course be better for all of us in terms of air and health and all that kind of stuff too. I work in healthcare. Do you think there's any chance the state might be interested in checking cars for emissions? Is there a possibility of a bill like that?
I think there's a lot of interest, but I think that's a hard road to hoe. I just think the infrastructure's not there. It would be, I'm originally from North Carolina. When I left North Carolina, so Chief and I were talking about this walking over here, because we just were talking about loud trucks, and one went by and we couldn't hear each other talk. You know, so I hate those things. I hate those. But in North Carolina, they had the inspection every year. You know, and they would stick the device.
I've lived in states like that too.
Yeah, I mean, and you could control it that way, but we don't have any infrastructure now to allow some methodology from trying to control that, other than just say, there goes a loud car.
Well, and we've talked about that in terms of the police enforcing it. It's really not so enforceable. I will leave that issue aside. But in terms of the infrastructure to check emissions, it's a job creation method, right?
Yeah.
So I looked up the states, and all the gas stations and service stations, they buy the equipment, they do the testing, they certify it. So for them, first of all, it's all better for all of our health. It probably reduces noise and it creates jobs. I mean, these are things that Republicans are interested in, job creation. So instead of saying the state has to create inspection stations, which some states do, I lived in Maryland, the state did it. But I believe in many states, like Georgia, it's just the gas station, you know, if they want to.
Yeah.
And then it's my responsibility as a car owner to go to places that have it. And in some states, it's just like, say, maybe only Columbia and Greenville would have it. Maybe a small town like Clemson wouldn't. But I'm wondering, do you think that would be something? I'm interested in suggesting it also for health reasons and the health of the planet. Do you think?
I would be interested in it as well. I don't think there's any reason to believe that something like that would pass, not these days and the environment we live in. And even where you're talking about with the gas stations and other private entities that open those businesses, you still have to have a state structure that licenses them, that goes in and inspects them, does safety checks, make sure they're applying it. So there is this level of government entity, you know, involvement that would have to be involved with it in some form or fashion. It's just not the sort of thing that I would think would get much discussion in Columbia these days.
Well, we just told, this gentleman suggested it, and I said I'd bring it to you. So,
I've got an email.
and I mean, it saves money in the long term in terms of health costs and the planet cost. You know, we have that hidden, right? We have hidden the cost of emissions, right, that hurt us all. We're not paying for that. So it's true the state would have to pay that to save money later in health costs, but I understand the climate.
I have an email in my box, I'm sure, from who you're talking about. And
Maybe the same citizen, who
yeah,
knows?
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm trying to respond. But, you know, I'm interested, too, every time when I go over to Greenville and downtown, they now have those signs that say something about loud cars.
We've talked about
And
those.
I'm trying to figure out how are they enforcing this? Because I'm sitting there listening to these cars go by and I don't see any enforcement. So it's a nuisance. I hate it. I've got, you know, I live down in Patrick Square. Every night between 10 and 10:30,
That's
somebody
when I
gets
hear
out.
it. That's when I hear it. I'm up in
Somebody gets out,
Dillwood.
it's like they're racing on 123. You hear it, it's the same car. I can tell by the sound of the engine. So it's kind of ridiculous. I have great empathy and sympathy for that situation. I wish I could do something. If there would be an opportunity, I would move on it, but it would be
Okay, I do believe South Carolina will get there,
I hope so.
but I hope it's not in 50 years, I hope it's sooner. But thank you for your opinion.
I hope so.
Do we have any other questions for Representative Carter?
You had something.
You answered my question on the constitutional carry. You said 50 sponsors, and I was asking, and you answered that is lawmakers that are sponsoring.
Yes, that's just from the House. There's 124 members in the House, and there is at least 50 people who've signed on and sponsored this bill. So once you saw that's huge for any bill. So once you see that, yeah, you know where it's going when you see that many sponsors. You know, don't get in the way because you'll get run over otherwise. But you know, that's what happens.
So this constitutional carry, too, just to add, would allow for open carry. And just as a caveat, in the beginning of the school year, I and Chief Mullen go and talk to the international students that come over here from other countries. And we now have to include in our discussion to the international students that just because someone is openly carrying a firearm does not mean that they are a law enforcement officer. And we have to give them tips on how to determine if it's a law enforcement officer or not and what to ask to make sure that they're not assuming that that person wearing a gun is a law enforcement officer. And so it can be confusing, people coming from another country, that does not occur, to know whether it's because before only police officers could openly carry, and now it's not the case.
Yeah, and I must say, when that passed, my fear was the next day I was going to see people walking around, you know, with holsters and guns, and I haven't seen that. I was very fearful.
I'm seeing them more and more.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing much, and it doesn't mean they're not got it under their jacket or something, but I thought that was going to be the case. But we had a good year. I think we had a really good year. I don't know, I can't cite anything specific coming up for the next year. We still got to go through, we did a breakup of DHEC, so we still got to figure out some of that. There's got to be more emphasis on mental health. That was one of the reasons for breaking up DHEC. It was just too large and couldn't give the emphasis it needed for certain areas. Continue to work with transportation. I hear our Secretary of Transportation is probably leaving us after a number of years, so we've got to find a new secretary. So we'll continue to do our work, but if there's anything that I can help you with, please let me know. I always appreciate the feedback. You know, I always hope that I am working on behalf of the people who live here and what they're interested in doing, and I am certainly available whether I'm in Columbia or I'm here. If I'm not here, I'm at Clemson Community Care with my wife. I have to drive a pickup truck now so I can help load food. So, you know, life's great. I appreciate it. I thank you guys for what you do, and I'll get you one of those directors.
Well, thank you very much for coming here. We
Well,
definitely
Can I
appreciate
ask
it.
one more question
You
about
can.
the open carry? Because, so if it's open carry now, that means if you have a gun, it's got to be in the open now?
No.
No, it means
No,
you
not
can't.
necessarily,
Just have
because when
the
I went
option.
to the training, it was supposed to be in the glove compartment and all this kind of
You
stuff.
can wear it on your hip now out in public.
But evidently you can have it concealed or open?
Yeah.
Okay.
And without any kind of training.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this good thought.
Well, I've had the training.
That concealed carry law, one large exception is there, it doesn't impact legislators.
So
So we're,
the one he's talking about hasn't passed yet.
yeah, it's still in the Senate.
Not passed yet, so.
It's not passed yet.
I'm
So
still got it in the
currently,
glove.
you have to have a concealed weapons permit in order to carry it concealed or open.
But we're exempted, so I'm not proud
Do
of
you
it.
have a question?
Oh,
Sandy?
Sandy.
Could you just have a moment to talk a little more specifically about the road construction? When you go from here to Columbia often,
Yeah.
and in Greenville now too, and Lord knows we need some improvements, so it looks like it's finally starting to happen. So can you make just a few more comments about what we believe we'll see this year after road construction?
You're gonna be inconvenienced. You're gonna be inconvenienced, which is what has to happen, but I mean, the money is there. Again, there was $1 billion last year, and there was, I think, $500 million this year that we added to transportation. The biggest issue is finding contractors now. I mean, we can't find the contractors, but there's everywhere I go. If I go to Charlotte, if I go to Columbia, if I go to Atlanta, I end up in some sort of large construction now. So they're really working hard on the interstates. And Sandy, as you know, down around Columbia, I mean, they're trying to cure that strange interchange down there between 20 and 26. So, I mean, it's progressing. It's just, you ignore it for 20 years, you don't fix it in 2. So it's, there's a lot of work and there's a lot, the money's there, which is a good thing. So we'll just keep pushing to get him to work.
Well, we really appreciate you coming and
Yeah,
also
thank you.
how quickly you respond when we ask you a question. You're
Yes.
doing
We appreciate
exemplary.
it,
at that.
definitely.
You're welcome, and I'll get George to get you those registers.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Okay, we can move on to
The department status and staffing.
Okay. I'll start with an update. I know we voted to make a recommendation to council on the noise ordinance verbiage. I've discussed it with Andy and with the mayor, and I think what I'm going to do is take some of the council members around with the noise meter and kind of show them where this statement would fall into place and why we're asking for it, and get their feedback that way before we officially bring it to them. So I'm working with their scheduling, and now that school's back in and I have more opportunities to go to a noise source and
Yes.
do a reading, I'll have more opportunity to do that with them versus their summertime.
great idea, super.
So in the department status, we still have 4 officer vacancies. One of them, we had an officer leave, and we have like 3 or 4 in the process, but then none of them are certified. So again, it's that training scenario. We have 2 that are in the academy. One is graduating next Friday. She'll be complete next Friday. And one had a little bump in the road. He's going back down tomorrow to get back into the cycle. We had 1 dispatcher vacancy as of yesterday. We had a candidate come sign a job offer, so she's starting next week. She has to be trained and go through the training. But we have 1 that's pending because we know one who's leaving. She hasn't left us yet, but she will be leaving us in the next couple of months, so we are actively interviewing people to replace her. And that is it for staffing. Okay, I'll move right into the crime review. I know I sent the email out to everybody about our crime mapping, and some of you have said that it's not working. I know. I had a conference call with them today. They're still, as in my original email, they're still trying to figure out the ancient database that is used for our current system and how to interpret it and then put it all where it needs to go. So this is a work in progress. That's why I haven't announced it to the public yet, because there's still a lot of bugs we have to work through. So along those lines, just kind of like a department status, we have signed a contract to go to a new RMS and CAD vendor. When I say RMS, it's Records Management System. That's where all of our reports and all our tickets and everything are written, and also all of our computer-aided dispatching. It's the same system that the university uses and the county uses. It's called Central Square is the company. I know I got a call last week from the project manager that's been assigned, so it'd probably take about a year, maybe a little bit longer, to convert all of our data into the new system and get the new system up and running. But we are progressing into a better system and have more accessibility to run reports and take a look at things, trends, so on and so forth. So the numbers and stuff that I give you now, that'd be easier to pull, so on and so forth. So crime-wise, we had 7 burglaries that were reported to us in the month of July. We had 5 thefts from vehicles. We had 3 motor vehicle thefts, and I know at least 2 of the 3 were moped or motorcycles that were stolen. We made 7 disorderly conduct arrests, 7 intoxication arrests. And one of those, I don't know if I talked about it last time, one of those arrests, we had, unfortunately, a young man who decided to shake one of our light poles downtown and break it while he was intoxicated. And unfortunately for him, he did it right in front of one of our downtown cameras, which got the whole thing on video. So now he will be going through the system and repaying the city for the damage that occurred. So our cameras continue to pay off for us. We wrote 242 citations in the month of July, and the breakdown of those, the majority of them were for speeding. 144 of them were for speeding. One citation was issued for a loud muffler. So, of course, this is July too, so the population that has most of the loud mufflers hadn't made it back here yet. So I anticipate we should have more. We had 1 DUI arrest, 25 collisions that were worked. We had 8 noise complaints and 5 noise violation issued, not citations, but warnings. So 5 warnings were issued. We housed 59 prisoners. We got 462 911 calls, and we did 4,600 calls for service in the month of July. So we can, even though it was the summertime, we still stay pretty active and busy. So that is the crime review for the month of July.
Chief, I have a question for you. The situation that happened with, a very unfortunate situation that happened with the student at USC, is there anything that we could do in our community to help work with the university?
So the person's at home and the people in here, Councilmember Robinson is referring to the USC student that was attempting to get into a home that was not his home, and he was shot and killed because the homeowner thought that someone was breaking into their house. That is one of my nightmares.
And
that
it's happened in a
Clemson.
couple of different states now where we've seen this happen, and it's, people feel.
This happens in Clemson.
Because of stand your ground, I think, that they feel that they won't do that. And I just fear for our students because, you know, they're out and they're stumbling home, or they're with a group of friends, they drop them off someplace, it's not the right place. And, you know, just to, how can we educate people to be more aware, but also for the citizens? I can understand you could be, you know, you hear somebody rattling your door, or, you know.
Well, that's pretty much a conundrum.
But why not call the police instead of shoot first, find out later?
Can I ask this, like the police have, I've seen this on TV, so I'm assuming it's correct, that when the police go into a situation, they have to announce that they are the police when they go into a situation. So I wondered why we don't have something like, if a homeowner feels threatened and they don't know who's out there, why can't they holler out something like, you know, something like that to announce, you know?
So part of the issue here is the laws have changed. There used to be a provision in the law that required the person who was going to do the shooting to take some kind of measure to ensure that either they were going to try to retreat from the situation or try to do something to disengage from the situation before they could shoot.
Is this like tied with Castle Doctrine?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Castle Doctrines have come out, and the laws have changed in which that requirement at your home no longer exists. And not only at your home, but it's extended to, in some places, like your personal property. So say your car in a parking lot and you're standing your ground. You've heard stand your ground laws, and a lot of that has come out of Florida and some other states, where that requirement is no longer there. If you're fearful for your well-being and your property's well-being, and you're defending yourself or your property, then you don't have to have that requirement. So that's the evolution of the law. And so to answer your question, how do we educate people? I mean, that is where I believe the required training that is going away now for concealed carry is how you train people not to become, not to be put in a situation that they're in such fear so quickly that they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. I think that, and I'm talking from my position and in the many years of training that I've had, that I'm going to try to identify my target before I'm going to make it a target. okay? And I'm gonna make sure that, okay, this is somebody that I need to shoot, okay? And,
So there's
but
no-
I have the opportunity, or what's the word I'm looking for, the blessing of having all that training and being put in training scenarios so that my fear level doesn't go to tilt fast. And I'm not saying all these people, their fear goes to tilt quickly, and I don't know anything about the person that did the shooting in Columbia. But that situation here in Clemson happens frequently. We have drunk people trying to get into apartments and houses that are not theirs frequently. They mistaken the house, especially in some of these apartment complexes where the apartments all look the same. You know, so there's a conundrum there. How do you educate?
So in many of these cases that have happened in other states, the people who were, their defense is that they were protecting themselves and their property, but they have successfully been charged. So maybe letting people know that even though you are within your right to take that action, you may actually end up on the other side of being.
So I think it really depends on how that state law is written, because some state laws are, the South Carolina state law is a little more forgiving, for lack of a better description, in those circumstances. And there are legitimate arguments as to why they are, because you can't paint all of these situations into one little square box every single time. There are nuances that occur that you can't account for. And if you make a law so restrictive, you know, the people may get hurt before they're able to try to defend themselves. And so that counter argument is always there, and it's a legitimate argument. So that's a real, you know, I fall back to having proper firearms training in emphasis on what your intended target is and when it's okay to fire at someone, and feeling confident enough that when that time comes, you had no other choice at that point, but you had plenty of time to react and properly defend yourself.
So is there no requirement to have to announce
That's
that
what I was gonna ask.
I'm, you know, you hear the rattling or whatever,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm armed and I am ready
Yes.
to shoot if need be?
I don't believe there's any requirement.
That someone on the other side would say, oh, you know,
Yeah.
I've got the wrong place.
Has there ever been, Chief?
Say again?
Has there ever been a requirement to announce for an individual?
I think
For a citizen.
before the laws changed, I don't know if I don't believe the law specifically said you had to announce, but you had to make some kind of effort to
Identify or whatever?
warn or disengage or something before you could just.
Well, it seems like in this climate that that's something that should maybe be on our radar a little bit more, and if there's something that we can do to help educate both parties, the homeowners as well as the students, you know, to.
I'd like to comment, as I'm on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And one, all these apartments do look the same. So it's like, they're these cookie cutter places. And I can tell more stories than I would like to of people either A, that I know have done this, have woken up in someone else, on the floor of someone else's apartment that wasn't theirs, a neighbor maybe, or alternatively have been home and had someone walk in their door and they're kind of like, what is happening? And so, I mean, it definitely happens a lot, and I think the worry definitely lies less with college kids and other college kids, because I'm not speaking for every college student, but most of us aren't out to get you like that, and you're dealing in single floor apartments. But when it comes to like that, I think there needs to be a lot more awareness on the student side, more so, because I think it's be far easier to address it at the be more responsible when you're drinking to just get back to the right place versus trying to tell someone who their house might be being broken into. Make sure you know what like, yeah, addressing the college student side seems far easier in my opinion.
I think you're right, because if you think about the situation that happened with the Uber and the student who got in the wrong car, now there's a lot of awareness of check, make sure it's the right driver, the right company, it's the car's labeled.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing is,
So I agree with what you're saying, but I think what you're also alluding to, and I'm going to say it quite frankly, most of the time, these are people who are extremely intoxicated. It is not a mild intoxication, and it's extreme intoxication. And unfortunately, we have a culture that doesn't really shun extreme intoxication or activity that leads to extreme intoxication. It's the college experience. I'm going to college and I'm going to, drink with my friends. And it's not casual drinking, it's extreme drinking or mixing with other things. And I say that because the ones that are going to these homes, I mean, it happens in the houses adjacent to the university all the time, adjacent to downtown. And they are not cookie cutter. And the person that's trying to get in there, for some reason, their brain has disassociated with logic, and they think that's the house they need to get into, or that's their buddy's house, and they go in there, and where we come into some of these situations is, what if it's a house that's occupied by 3 females who are all asleep, and next thing they know, they got this guy trying to barge through their door. What is he trying to do? What is his intention? And if he's so out of it, what is he going to do once he gains entry to them? We don't know. It's not like they look around and go, oh, I don't recognize this place, and they walk out. They continue whatever activity that it is. And hopefully, we hope that their activity is not violent, but what if it becomes violent? So there's that argument again of, well, how long do you have to wait before you're going to shoot? Because you don't know what this person's going to do, and they're trying to actively get into your house. They're not just rattling your door, they're kicking your door, they're smashing your window, they're doing somewhat violent things to get into the house. So the homeowner or the person inside, what do they have to think? What's going through their mind about why they just got woken up from a dead sleep and this person is banging on the door trying to kick it off its hinges? So, what are they trying to do?
Such a danger.
And it's a tragedy. A tragedy occurs. So that's why I say this conundrum comes up, because we can make arguments all day long one way or the other. I think we have to address this culture of drinking. I am seeing more and more and more fake IDs in the bars than I ever have before. And they're good. They're getting them from overseas. They look like real driver's licenses. It's very difficult for the bars to detect that it's a fake ID. So that means we have people under the age of 21 that are engaging in drinking activities. They're not using the ID just to go in there and not drink. They're using the IDs to go in there and drink. And so it compounds and compounds and compounds. At some point, we have to take a stance against it. And a lot of our underage drinking laws and being in possession, they're minor crimes, they're minor things. The university does what they can to address them and to educate them about how that could be a thing. But a lot of the kids know what the strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. I have 3 strikes I can go through before something serious happens on my record. And so so what kind of culture are we promoting by allowing that to continue? I don't know the complete answer. I mean,
Well, fortunately, we haven't had any fatal situations, but it's something that I think we need to continue to look at, because it's a bad combination.
It seems that the other individuals present, in the presence of this severely intoxicated person, it seemed to be in the past, someone would take some kind of action to try to make sure this severely intoxicated person was safe to a degree. I know last year on Calhoun, our neighbors, they have a 6-foot fence, and this I think it was a student, but opened their gate, went in their backyard, came to the back door. Luckily, this couple, they have no weapons and they use good judgment and call the police. But on Cochran, we've helped a young lady, middle of the night, who passed out, on the sidewalk, sitting up against the fence. No friends, or if she had friends, they just walked on. We're able to call someone to come that we could document. So I put a lot of responsibility on individuals who are in the presence of someone that's impaired also to do
Well,
something.
I would even argue in those situations that person is so intoxicated, they don't need to go home. They need to go to the hospital because they're too intoxicated.
Yeah,
Okay?
alcohol toxicity, basically.
Yes, and so, here we go again with different laws and stuff, but there are laws in other states that if you are so intoxicated that you cannot care for yourself, you get involuntarily taken to an emergency room until you are sober enough to leave. And I think that has saved more people's lives because A, it's taking them out of elements where they could get hurt by getting hit by a car, getting shot, or being taken advantage of. But also from a medical standpoint, if they have some type of reaction, I have worked cases where students have gone home severely intoxicated and were put in their bed, slept on their backs, swallowed their tongue, and choked to death.
Right. Or vomited and aspirated.
Yeah, or aspirating and vomiting, and because they are too intoxicated. So in those situations, they need to go to the hospital.
Sure. It just
and
takes a
monitor.
person who cares to, see something and say something.
I know you've had something.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, to follow up what Dr. King said, the ones that I hear about on the news, those don't seem to have anything, they didn't involve intoxication. These were innocent, the last one did. I think the South Carolina one did, but there were several before that were just innocent people. Kids, young people that went to the wrong house looking for one was looking for his brother and he went to the wrong address. It was particularly one, and there were several others that didn't involve intoxication. I'm not saying this would solve everything, but it seems to me, I try to put myself in this situation, and I do have a gun. I also have a dog, but I would say, before I would shoot, I would say something. I've got a gun pointed at the door. Move. I mean, I can't imagine just shooting somebody.
I don't think there's any notice requirement. There's nothing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, now if they were in my house, that'd be a different thing. But I would probably be saying that coming down the hallway. I got a gun, get out, before I would shoot. I actually was in this situation years and years ago. And I don't know.
You would hope people would do that.
Do that, you would hope, yeah, but, yeah.
Rationale, but people's fear factor goes crazy.
Yeah.
When it comes to, at least when it comes to intoxicated people, the people that are this intoxicated, I think, I believe Chief Kim has probably agreed, like, that warning's not gonna do anything. At least for a severely intoxicated
It's not gonna
person,
resonate with them.
Yeah. But I'm saying, at least in the cases where the person is making a legitimate mistake, and there have been several of those, that people were just young kids. I mean, just go to the wrong house. I don't know.
I have seen those as well.
Yeah.
And, would that prevent a shooting from occurring before the person, even after giving the warning, stop?
Well, I think if it was an innocent thing,
I think in some of those cases, like the one child who, unfortunately, his life was taken looking for his brother, I think the person that did the shooting had other issues that contributed to why he pulled the trigger.
Okay. I didn't hear the circumstances.
Yeah, it was an older gentleman that may have had some undiagnosed conditions that added to his paranoia, and unfortunately it happened. Now, the initial stories that came out, they didn't say anything, but I think as they followed it, they learned that was the case. But, here we go again, and we can have this debate all day long.
Yeah, I didn't mean to take us down the rabbit hole, but.
The most recent shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, that was race-based, that they're currently investigating, that gentleman was Baker acted when he was 15 years old. for mental illness, and he was still able to legally purchase 2 firearms before he went on a shooting spree. So that's another issue altogether. But yeah, I
just think in our community, because we have the student
we
population,
do have
and a lot of the
residents.
student population lives in the community, that this is something
We have a lot of residents that realize that's going to happen, and they have weird people coming to their door or to their property that are too intoxicated and handle it properly. There's always those anomalies out there. Now, where it happened at USC, I don't know this for a fact, but I could be wrong on this, but the neighborhood that this happened in was not a typically student-populated neighborhood. It's near the university, but it's not, and if you've ever been to USC, it's intertwined with the state capitol. So depending on where you live and whether there's a lot of students that live there or not, where here in Clemson, you know, unless you're out off Berkeley as Aquina, you're probably never going to run into someone who's trying to get into your house over there. But if you live on Riggs or Edgewood or Wigington, you're probably going to run into somebody that may try to get in your house one day because of this situation. So anyway.
Thank you. Let's move on to recruitment of board members. So this gets posted, the application for board members gets posted, is that correct, on the city site?
On the city side, I believe around December, because the terms end in January. But something I want to point out, and we kind of talked about this before, and we really didn't go anywhere. When it comes to the Clemson student position and the high school position, because January is in the middle of the school year, it sometimes becomes problematic. So we would have to make an amendment to the ordinance to allow for those positions to change outside of that cycle if we're going to, because
would you suggest just for those 2 seats?
for those 2 seats, so that,
So maybe in February, or?
no, I would say probably
Or before?
And that's something to discuss, and we don't have to make that decision today, but either because the student government is involved sometimes in selecting the Clemson position, that may be better suited, and I'll rely on Riley to give input, but that may be better suited to be the position to be applied for and announced before graduation in the spring, so that they're in place when they come back in the fall. Otherwise, if we wait until the beginning of the fall, you got to give them a few, like a month or 2 to get their feet underneath them to make an appointment, and then we'll have 2 months when we won't have a representative. And if the outgoing representative is no longer a student, then it becomes problematic. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, Riley would know more than me.
So there's a couple things. One, I agree. I think it should either transition over end of the school year. That way, if you're a student here, you finish out end of April, sometime over the summer. Because a lot of times too, they're unless people stay in Clemson over the summer, more than likely, whoever your representative is going to head off to wherever they may go. The other thing is, I'm now chairing a student government committee. It's existed for a year, but really they didn't do anything with it. It's a public safety advisory board, and basically we're responsible for all things law enforcement, public safety when it comes to like student advocacy and student government, and kind of like the liaison between the police department, fire department, and student government. So I believe it will be far easier to find a representative out of that board itself, and I think that could even down the line be not necessarily like a responsibility, but of this board just be a recommendation of you find someone good that we could recommend to bring to y'all for that position. And that's something we can explore, just having kind of an unwritten rule, kind of where so I'll tell them to send someone here to apply.
And that time frame in the spring, in terms of opening the application in the spring?
That would probably be the best, because more than likely, it would be passed on by whoever held it to the last time would know of someone who would be able to carry out the position well and could refer some people to the application while they were obviously not to a graduating senior, but to a sophomore or junior that could serve the position for the next year.
Is that a recommendation, Chief, that you can make to council? Is that something?
Well, we would have to rewrite the ordinance
Yeah.
and present it to council, and it would take 2 readings for it to go into effect. I can draft something for the next meeting. I can send it out to everybody beforehand to take a look at it. And then if we get it changed prior to January, then that would give us until April or whenever we decide to make that position open. So that would transition into this thought process. And I like identifying the person before school year ends,
Right.
because we normally waive their attendance during the summer.
Right.
So they can go do whatever they're gonna do during the summer. They don't have to be in town. But when they come back in the fall, they're ready to go in August, and then we don't have to worry about who it's gonna be.
That seems like that would make a lot of sense if we could do that for the next meeting.
And
Look at that.
you know, I have to talk to the mayor too, because I would like to see, because normally the council has to vote on it, and vote on the application. I'd like to see if they would be okay with, if the student government assigned them, then they would adopt it. As long as there's no objection or objectionable reason for that particular person to be on it. So, you know, have an arrest history or something like that. But I want to talk to the mayor and see how he feels about that.
That's definitely something we could work at the student government level. So, but at the very least, changing the window, and we have on our end, we have a rule that one of this committee's jobs is to send someone to apply for this position every year, and to pick someone that will actually show up and participate and do a good job.
All right, great. And then also along the lines of board recruitment, we want to make sure that we're looking at a diverse pool in terms of where people are, which communities people are in, business owners, other citizens, and so just, letting people that who might be interested, just, letting them know about those applications. And Chief, you let us know when the applications are posted.
I will. The clerk usually does that, but I think we sent something to you last meeting about whose terms end when, so you kind of know.
And current board members can reapply.
As long as it's not more than 2 consecutive terms.
Okay, next we have requested presentations. Are there any other persons we want to invite to speak to us, or other information we want to gather? Any suggestions at this
So
time?
Chief Kramer's still on the list. I haven't told him when to come yet,
Okay.
because I think the recommendation last time was to give it a meeting or 2 before we have another guest speaker come in. So next meeting, we probably won't have a guest speaker, so that would be September, so maybe in October.
October, yeah, that would be.
And then just at the same time, while we're talking about it, November, the meeting always falls on Thanksgiving week, so start thinking about if you want to push it up a week or back a week. Usually back a week is not desired because there's other things that come out after Thanksgiving. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah, probably forward.
And then same thing with Christmas. It usually falls on Christmas, so we got 2 months in a row that we have to find an alternate
I
date.
think last year we did the week before, right? Isn't that what
Something
we
like
did?
that, yeah.
We bumped it up a week,
It was either the week before or 2 weeks before. I can't remember. There was maybe it was Christmas that it was 2 weeks before because of all the things that go on.
Well, at the next meeting, since Eunice is out in Ashby, let's,
Okay.
figure that out and get those dates.
I do have something that I'd like to propose. So I own some property in town, and they do the inspections every year. And the inspector came and we talked, and he had a dog with him. And it's a cadaver dog. It's not like a canine what the police would use to apprehend people. It's not an apprehension dog. And I didn't know this, but they can call a facility, which whatever designated that is. But he can actually bring this dog and they can find missing elderly, or they can find if there's somebody that's deceased or whatever. It's, I don't know how the chief would feel about us having that, but I think it'd be a good, he said he's got a couple dogs, and he said he would bring one in and go through the demonstration and stuff, but we talked for about a half an hour about it, and it's pretty impressive.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Is that, would you all be interested in that?
I've seen it used,
Yeah,
but
so the sheriff's office has dogs that are trained for that. So if we needed to use a dog, I have access to dogs that do that. And then there are some coroner's offices in the state when it comes to cadavers that, as a matter of fact, we used a cadaver dog when we were searching the lake for the gentleman that jumped from the train trestle 2 years ago. They had a cadaver dog that was in the boat that was sniffing the surface of the water. So we have, when we need them, we have access to them.
I remember you mentioning that before, and I do have a question about that. So, are we using their dogs, the sheriff department dogs? Would you rather have your own dog? Or is it we just don't have one now because maybe financially we can't afford it or whatever, or does it work out pretty well that way?
We have not had a situation in quite some time where we needed a dog right away. And the decision to retire our current dog was made for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons was because we haven't really had any situations where we needed the dog. The second part of that is staffing. Whenever you assign a team together, they have to be committed for that for several years. And I have a very young department, and I have folks that aspire to do other things, and you know, you're looking at a 7-year commitment to doing nothing but that. So it was a weighing of need versus want versus, you know, need versus want, and the need isn't there right now. And when we do need them, we have access to them, and we can get them fairly quickly between Oconee County and Pickens County. If we ever need an explosives dog, the university has an explosive dog. Anderson County has some dogs that we can ask for. Some people have asked me, well, what about detection of narcotics? And well, if your officers are trained well enough, they don't necessarily need a dog per se, if they know what they're doing, and several of my officers do. There are situations where a dog definitely helps, but we're not there yet. So I'm not opposed to having dogs on our staff. I just need to make sure that I have the need and I have the people who are dedicated to do it.
Well, that could be interesting, Kevin.
Well, I mean, if there's no interest there, I get it. I was pretty impressed with, I mean, I you know, you just don't ever, I guess you don't think about that. If an elderly gets missing or something, you can't find him, the dog can find him pretty quick.
Yep.
You know, but.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna call for open discussion, so go ahead.
Oh, open, okay, I thought that was open discussion. I'm sorry, go
No, that's
ahead.
fine.
I have a question. I had a resident ask me, they called in a noise ordinance last week, and they wanted me to see if I could find out what happened about that noise ordinance. And I have the time, I have the day, and I have the street it was called from. Is there any way to find that out?
Sure, just shoot me an email with that information and I'll look it up.
Okay, they just want to know what came of it. Okay.
Do we have any other discussion before we adjourn?
Two things.
Oh, yes, go
I'd
ahead.
just like to say to the chief, the National Night Out event seemed to me to go really, really well. So start on that.
Kudos to that
Yes.
lady right back there.
Absolutely.
Put it together.
Another great event.
And that event,
That's the
I was sick.
advocate, right?
Because I about fell out over there, but she did a great job. It was hot. I know that the first Tuesday of October is when the university will do their National Night Out event. And they wait till October because that's when the students are.
And it was wonderful to have the car seats there, that they were fitting car seats and had them to donate. That was great.
That's been a need in our community for quite some time, and I approached Sonia and asked her if she would be willing to be trained in that, and one or two of my other employees, and they both said yes, and we partnered with CUFD, the fire department, to go through that training, and I know they're getting some people trained in that so that we can offer that more often. But we definitely have people that can't afford car seats, and this program, not only will they ensure that your car seat is properly put in the car, installed in the car, but they have resources to be able to get car seats to people that can't afford them and make sure that they're in the car. So I'm very proud of Sonia for going through that training and being our point of contact for that.
Thanks for mentioning that, Sandy, because definitely kudos to you on another great event. That was really good. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn if there's nothing further?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so moved. Seconded? All in favor? All right, we are